Vice President Harris underscoring to her supporters that she is the underdog in this race. But despite that, the polls done after last week's Democratic National Convention are starting to show some key changes in the race. A new poll of likely voters from USA Today and Suffolk University shows Vice President Harris with a 5-point lead over Trump in a field including third party and independent candidates. Now, that is still within the margin of error. But remember, in late June, this same poll had Trump with a near 4-point lead over President Biden. The Wall Street Journal is now out with a new poll today that shows Harris with a 2-point lead in a field with multiple opponents. That's also within the margin of error. And then take a look at these favorability numbers from that poll. 49% of voters have a favorable view of Vice President Harris. Her running mate, Tim Walz, he's at 46%. When it comes to Trump and Vance, more voters have an unfavorable opinion of each. Joining me now to discuss it all is Democratic strategist Chuck Rocha. He is a New York Times opinion contributor, co-host of the Latino Vote podcast, and president of Solidarity Strategies. Tara Setmeyer is here, former GOP communications director and CEO of the Seneca Project. And LaTosha Brown is also with us, co-founder of the Black Voters Matter Fund. Okay, Chuck, you know, all of this polling, take it with a grain of salt, I always tell folks. Sure. You know, polls are not predictive. They're indicative of a snapshot in time. And I also believe that this is going to be a close race here. Sure. So what do these polls tell us, though? Is this a sign that the messages from the convention are resonating?
Me and you've dealt with lots of candidates over our careers.
Yes. I used to work with Chuck Rocha. Yes.
We've worked together with lots of candidates. And what I tell all the candidates is, look, it's one poll, but polls strung together will show you something that's happening. And I gave the Trump campaign credit early on when their polls were moving. There was some stuff happening. And then there has been a definite shift. You know, I still work in lots of congressional races and Senate races around the country. And you talked earlier in the segment about focus groups. Mm-hmm. And what we're hearing in focus group is there's this real true to life energy out there. Mm-hmm. Does that mean we're going to win? Does that mean we need to have a parade tomorrow? No. It just means that there are things moving. There's only a small group of people in just a handful of states who's actually going to make the difference here. And those 6 states, one of those is Georgia that I know we're going to talk about.
One of those is Georgia. LaTosha, look, a lot of people said that this accelerated campaign would really be a race by both the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign to define Vice President Harris. It looks like, though, these polls mean that she has won the race about defining, or is that a wrong read of this?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think part of this idea of that she has to define herself, she has been in office for 3.5 years as part of an administration. And so some of that, I think, has been like a bait and switch, like let's throw something out when we don't have anything legitimate, a legitimate concern, particularly since she's rising in the polls. I think what we're seeing is we're actually seeing this energy and this momentum that is on her side right now. I think that the Republicans grossly underestimated the impact of coming after women with reproductive rights and reproductive justice. I think they grossly underestimated the impact of that and how I think that's playing itself out. What we're seeing is we're seeing young women register to vote at record numbers. We're seeing women volunteer at record numbers. And so part of what is happening is there's a lot of energy. There's a bump from the DNC, but I think there's a lot of energy based on who she is, but also what she stands for.
Tara, to LaTosha's point about maybe perhaps the bad taste that has been left in voters' mouths with some of the things coming from Trump and Vance, at least half of voters in this Wall Street Journal poll have a bad impression of Donald Trump and his running mate. So if this was a normal campaign, you think this might be a sign to change the strategy, but these are not normal times, and it doesn't seem as though there's a chance of a strategy shift from the Trump camp.
Right, and these are also not normal candidates on the Trump side. There's nothing normal about J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, and it's perplexing to me that it's still only half of the American people have an unfavorable view of either one of them. I guess that speaks to a whole different set of issues we can diagnose at another time. But you're right. Anytime you're underwater, over 50% unfavorable, usually not a good trajectory. I think that there is something to be said, and LaTosha mentioned it, particularly about women and the way women have reacted to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and their campaign has been pretty remarkable. And the Republicans have been unable to counteract it. J.D. Vance seems to find another category of women to insult every week. Donald Trump can't decide which con he's going to attempt to run on women in America, on his positions when it comes to reproductive rights, and whether they trust women to make their own health care decisions, because he knows that the position that they have taken and the actions that he has taken, that he's bragged about, impact women. It's taken a right away from American women, and they're mad as hell about it. And the idea of we won't go back is a very powerful one. And the Republican Party has yet to answer for it. And they can't, because they did this. They did this to us in this country. And there is no amount of marketing, of BSing that Donald Trump is going to put out there that's going to convince American women that he's not responsible for the fact that we've lost a right.
I think
and that
Donald
Kamala
Trump
Harris is in a position, right, to defend that and to make sure that we try to get those rights back. They're not going to win this.
I think Donald Trump would love nothing more than to be able to change the narrative here. And again, I don't see it either. Stranger things have happened, Chuck Rocha, but I just don't see it. Let's just put in perspective what Tara and Latasha put on the table here, because there is a split screen happening. You know, for the past 2 days, Vice President Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz have been campaigning in Georgia, in southern Georgia, a place the last time that they saw a Democratic presidential candidate was 1992. I'm talking about Bill Clinton. It seems as though that energy that came from the Democratic National Convention is now, they're deploying that, if you will, in the South Georgia. And there is a Gallup poll that kind of speaks to this as well. There's a lot of excitement among Americans about the election. In this poll, nearly 70% are more enthusiastic than usual about voting. Enthusiasm is important. That's up 15 points from March, by the way. It's an all-time high for Gallup. Enthusiasm is not the only thing campaigns need, right? I like to say, you know, we work for Bernie Sanders. Crowds don't necessarily vote.
That's right.
But enthusiasm matters,
It does
right?
matter when you're trying to get folks. And let's go back to Georgia, because enthusiasm matters here, because in Georgia, folks are younger. There's 1 million Latino voters in Georgia. 1 million. There's a lot of people who have moved to Georgia because it's a great place to live. It's young. It's energetic. There's the film industry. There's all this stuff going on, which has attracted lots of young people. Those same young people, just 3 months ago, were saying, I'm not sure. We're not that ginned up. They have a new fire. And there's one thing that me and Simone can tell all of you about a campaign. There's a golden rule in campaigns, which there's one thing you can never get back in a campaign, and that's time. For them to be spending time in Georgia, they would not be doing this close to the election. It's too late for head fakes. They're down there because they can win that state, and their numbers say that. So watch where they go. That tells a lot.